So I think there's several reasons playing together for companies decaying lifetime for the last maybe 50 years. You can read in the literature several framings of this problem. Maybe one of the most famous is the Innovators Dilemma, where kind of companies which are really into the market in the beginning have kind of a great idea how to disrupt the market, how to adopt the market, kind of get lazy into the direction of the market after a certain amount of time, because what they want to do is that they want to exploit this one business model that they found as much as they can, and try to kind of go for a higher margin rather than a larger saturation of the market after a certain point in time, which leads to them being far away from the market and not knowing what the market actually needs. So what they cannot do for growth is they cannot understand what problems to solve for new people on the market. And this means there's no growth. And if there's no growth, nowadays in this complex world, it means that you get killed off by the market. So the fastest learner wins, and you're not the fastest learner anymore, and you're gone. Another framing of the same phenomena is a famous model called the Three Horizons model, which frames it like the following. To have sustainable business, a company needs to be active and deploy people on three horizons. The first horizon is one we're very well educated in schools and universities, which is how do we make a business out of what we have today, out of the products we have, out of the services we can provide. And what we learn there is that we know our business and that we know the work we have to do. We just need to ask the salesman and the marketing guys. We need to do what they know from the client, do it in a very predictable way, in very high quality, in a perfect way. We kind of perfect our processes, go into operational excellence, and this is how we increase margins while we still do the same thing all the time. And this is a part of the business we all need. So every company needs to have this. And what the model says is that you need to deploy around 80% of your people on this horizon. But of course, this horizon is not enough. And there's one major problem behind it. It is that the client cannot tell you what he needs. There's a job to be done from us as a company to find out what the client actually needs. So if we always do what he tells us, because we're known on what the sales guys tell us, we will come to a certain decline. One example would be what we all know, the media right now, newspaper outlets and so on. What they do is they go for clickbait, because the one business model they have right now is based on ad revenue. So if you just go for content that is clickbait, your whole point of having high quality journalism will be gone after a few years. And this is what we're seeing right now. Newspapers are really fighting hard to reinvent themselves, to sell the values they have in journalism, because they just go for the mass market, because there's just one business model behind them. So here sets in the second horizon we will need to work on, which is Horizon 2, of course. And this takes care about finding future business and future growth. And here we have a totally different task, which is we need to find out how we will make money in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time. And of course, we cannot know today because we don't have the crystal ball. So the task in this horizon is to actually challenge what we're doing right now, because we need to come up with the question, what are we not doing well enough? What different services or products do we need to offer to the client? And here is the clash we have in companies. So if we deploy people to this Horizon 2 work, what will happen is they will need to conquer the company with the question and the framing of, we are not doing things right. We need to do different things. And of course now, for everybody employed in Horizon 1 work, perfecting the current offerings, this is an offense. Because I'm so much into perfecting what we do, delivering in a predictable way what we know, that these guys, mostly from new business or strategy, are an offense to what we're doing. So to give an example, when I was working on a product which was working really well in Germany. These guys came to me and said, you know, we need to go to Germany. Of course, my reaction was, now we need to go to Italy. And my reaction, of course, was, well, are you guys crazy? How Italy? It doesn't even work in Germany on the level I want it to work. So here's a real cultural boundary between this horizon. It gets even further on Horizon 3, which takes care about something even more abstract, options for future growth, where we try to look out very far into the future on possible tendencies and trends for new business models which might complement what we're doing. So if we think about how can we kind of cross these chasms between these horizons, there's a very nice model. One is called bimodal IT, and I would kind of extend it to the whole business. It's a bimodal organization, which says you need to have a part in your organization which takes care about the current things, and you need a more agile part of the organization which takes care about your future business, which you still have to find. The problem with this model, which is very much promoted by Gartner, for example, is that still both aspects have a very hard clash when they meet each other. So there's a nicer metaphor on this by a great guy and a strategist from Britain. He's called Simon Wardley, and he talks about pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And this is kind of a great solution. What he says is, it's normal in the world that you have pioneers which go out, discover a new country or a new uncharted part of the map and say, this is a great opportunity for us. And now they're done because they don't have the patience for the details to really actually settle down there. So now they need to come up with that opportunity they saw, give it over, hand it over to the settlers who kind of build the first schools, build the first roads, build the first infrastructure, and then get fed up with that because they're settlers, they're not town planners, which is the third party we need to give over and hand over these things. Once we came up with the first product, we give it over to town planners, and the town planners come up with a real stable way of building roads, building houses, coming up with settlements and whatever. So we have this division between three different kinds of people we have anyway in our society, which are all valuable and which our manager's task is to come up with environments to work on in a respected way. One problem is that now very counterintuitive things will happen. For example, that we need to protect the three areas from each other, as well as leave them to respectancy of each other. So this is kind of a first analysis of what you just came up with. We are not used to making these boundaries explicit. So most companies have a model of one size fits all, because this is how we grow up, how we get educated in school. We're very good. So basically, it comes down to a cultural issue. We are very well educated in doing things perfect and predictable and so on, coming up with perfect results, coming up with solutions, not problems. And what you need to do in Horizons 2 and 3 is quite the opposite. What we need to do there is, as we do not know what we have to do, we need to find it out. So it's kind of a research activity. And research means that we go in a totally different direction. We go into the direction of we need to buy very little information as often as possible for a very small price. That means we work with imperfect results which we need to present to our environment. So here we go. Imagine a Monday 3 o'clock management meeting where we need to come up with all the decisions on proposals on the different horizons. So a proposal on Horizon 1 would mean, I have this improvement program. If we invest in it like 100,000 euros, we will make another 200,000 euros each month from half a year's time from now on. On Horizon 2 and 3, the proposals that come in the same meeting are, we think we are on the brink of finding something out which might be very valuable. I think we need to extend research for another 3 months with a 5-person team. So what we see is We have a high level of certainty in Horizon 1 proposals, a high level of uncertainty and uncertainty of outcome in Horizon 2 and 3 proposals. So in these meetings, Horizon 1 will always win because we're so much used to it, and it's so nice to have these results immediately. So it's really hard for companies to make these differences explicit, and to why it's hard, because we just have this one model, and what we need to come up with is we need to make explicit that now we are working on Horizon 2 or 3. And to make this explicit, I think, and it is my experience, that we need to protect the different horizons in a way from each other. To give you an example, let's imagine a strategy meeting where we ask ourselves a Horizon 2 question. How can we up with the right tools we need for Italy from 2017 on? The developer who's working on our German platform right now will go crazy once these strategies really identify with the clients of the Italian platform. He will say, you know, this is not working with our APIs. I think we're talking bullshit about identifying with the client that much. We just need to do what's possible right now. Otherwise, it will never work. We'll need 2 years' time and so on. So it's really a clash of cultures and outcomes between these levels. So we really need to protect them. And to give you maybe the most pinpointed example of what we need to do is, if you look at what Apple does, they have a number cruncher like Tim Cook, who's maybe one of the best supply chain managers on the world, with one of the most adorable supply chains in the world. And he came up with an environment, or Steve Jobs came up with an environment where this number cruncher totally accepts and embraces what a totally different person does, namely Jony Ive, who's kind of a totally creative designer kind of guy who doesn't have a clue about supply chains and economy and so on, and he doesn't need to have. He's here to find new problems to solve for new people. So what Steve Jobs did is he created an environment where these totally different people have a place to live, where they are not disturbed from the other guy, but accept each other and let as much information flow as is needed, but not more. And this is one of the general principles we need to follow, that we understand these different types of work and come up with the real great environments for each type of work, and just kind of let them mingle as much as we need, but not more. So that's, of course, a brilliant question. And as it's a hard question, I like to rely on somebody else who's kind of lots of experience with it. I have lots of practical experience, but this guy really brings it to a very clear point. The guy's called John Kotter, and he is a specialist in change. How can we change big companies from where they are today to a different point? And the point he makes is, if you look at big companies, what's happening to them is that they, in the beginning, and this reflects what we said before, in the beginning they are close to the market, have good ideas, then they want to exploit the model. So what they do is they kind of start to come up with structures and hierarchy and silos so that they get more operational excellent. And after time, of course, every silo gets its own purpose. So the silos don't work that well together anymore. So the company gets slower and slower and less probable to change. So he comes up with the idea that at that stage where a company is just comprised of a hierarchy and lots of silos that don't work together that well anymore, what you do is you install a new center of gravity, a small networked system of very highly talented people and very entrepreneurial people who really want to go for where the company started years ago, with having a look on the market and so on. So these people now will be extracted from the company, can exploit what the company does, have a look on the market, come up with a new vision of an opportunity, want to follow this opportunity, recruit a volunteer army, how he says, in the company to actually execute these visions and projects so that they can show quick results to the company, so that the whole model of these guys are doing something great, rather than having a party we're not part of out there and considered something special in the company, is getting rid of. And new success from this new access to the market is shown right away to the people. And afterwards, what's happening is that it's management's part to get rid of all the impediments which are in place for these people. And what's happening with all the results they can show off is that the rest of an organization, the hierarchy and the silos, can see that this is actually valuable, and they get more and more drawn into what these people do, as they need to deliver on what these people find. And with this credibility, the whole of the company changes to something more fluent and agile and likely to change and adopt to these challenges that the company sees. So that's a great model, and I've seen it working so many times that I totally went for it and tried it in practice. Projects which are either finding a new product for a company or a new business model, or initiate change, like I just described it, is that I have lots of talks in the beginning with ideally the CEO, that he buys into that idea and totally commits to the idea of bringing up this new system. And how I do it practically is that I buy time for a team of maybe 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 people, and kind of beg for the commitment from the COO that I can work with this team for a certain amount of time. And what I would then do with this team is that I go into practices like highly collaborative, maybe design thinking or market or customer research based things, so that we can find valuable problems to solve for the clients. And why I need the people outside of the company with that strict time commitment to them is that I need them to adopt some outside thinking again, because normally what happens is that these people for the first 2 weeks maybe will just follow ideas that they're apparent in the company anyway and obvious, and all these ideas normally have little value. So I need to get them outside of the company very far and have lots of customer insight, so that they can come up with totally new ideas, which are then so convincing that we go back to the CEO. And further, during the research, so many findings will come out for the rest of the company in some models of how we can get little growth in Horizon 1, for example, as well. So we find insightful things for Horizon 1 also, that we can sell this as kind of a success model. And after that happened, we can go on with this and have credibility in the company and do more detailed work. And what we find very small products in the beginning which we can just release, or small business models to add on to what's happening, so that we gain trust in the company. And this is how we do it in practice. What we basically do is we steal time for the companies to let people go out of the company and have a fresh outside view on what we would actually need to do, which is funny enough what outsiders would recommend to the company anyway in most of the times, but the company itself cannot find out of all the blind spots we all have. So this is not a bad thing. It's what happens to all of us naturally, and this is what we need to work against with these models. So the hardest challenges in doing this are, I think, mainly 2 things. The first thing is the beginning, to get the trust to these models, to really get, you need a very insightful CEO or sponsor inside a company who sees that problem and kind of gives up control that much that you are basically leading his team for these important things. And there's a lot of vanity in how could this guy with this team find things we didn't see for years. So this is kind of the hardest step. And afterwards, it's kind of, as I said, this work on Horizon 2 and 3 is really, people are not that much used to it. It's really different and highly collaborative. It's not like we meet once a week, Wednesdays, 2 p.m. We work the whole week through in a team, in a small room, with paper prototypes, with asking lots of clients and so on. So it's really, people are not used to this type of work normally. And getting them used to that work and is the hardest part, I think. Whereas once they're in it, it's so much fun to them. It's really stressful and hard work all the time, because it's really non-linear, which means you have to find lots of things and throw them away again, find other things and throw them away again. So it's really hard work, but they have lots of fun. And what I always say to some of them when I'm having my lunch conversations is, I want us, that you think this is the best project you ever worked in, and that it's such a nice thing, that you actually want to go on like this for all time, and this is what I want to achieve with the team. And most of the time it actually works, so that's the good part. And another important thing in this is that we're so much into efficiency thinking that these projects work totally different. So lots of quality time with the people doing this new kind of work is very important. So having extended lunch, going for a coffee, and all these things, which is sometimes just forget about, is really important in these projects. So here comes the fun thing. So it sounds like bragging a little, but I did not have one project which did not pay off in the end. So what I just talked about, that it's really hard in the beginning, it always ends up with these people really finding new opportunities, which are then really implemented in the companies, really lead to success. And of course, it's not like you do this for 2 or 3 months and you kind of totally pivoted and turned around your company and reinvented it, but it's kind of the beginning of seeing these new opportunities and investing more in it, which is the whole point of the Three Horizons model, that you get back to making explicit that you need to work on all these 3 horizons, that you need to invest in all 3 horizons. And that's really the fact I have everywhere I get the chance to have this first step, that companies get back to realizing that they need to do this work, that they need to educate people on it, that they need to get the people to, that it's really worthwhile in investing in it and just doing it. And it's kind of a real turnover for them in the long run. So it really worked in all the cases that I got the chance. The hard part is really getting the projects first. Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because of course there are conflicts in this model. So of course, the natural fit of lean and agile, you would think, is in the visionary part, in the pioneers part, which is for agile development in a way. But on the other hand, if you see where agile and lean comes from, it comes more or less from, we know what to build and we want to build it in a better way, maybe with more empowerment to the people and more engagement to the people. But really, agile and lean are kind of production things. So it really comes down to, lean and agile are better ways to efficiently develop what we know we need to develop. Now, the counterintuitive thing is that agile and lean also have their roots in a very old paper by Nonaka and Takeuchi, which is called Where Scrum Comes From, and which describes how Japanese companies in the 70s, 80s developed new products, which was with highly cross-functional teams, T-shaped teams, in a very creative, collaborative way. So I think that we need to come back to that. We bring agile and lean into the pioneers part and let people learn how to explain the agile and lean ideas in the pioneers part, maybe even to the settlers part, and then let town planners be more in the standards way of ITIL and Lean Six Sigma and whatever standards-based approaches. So I think what we need to relearn here is how to use agile and lean in the more discovery part of companies. And I think that we ended up somewhere that agile is working more or less nowadays in the production part of the companies. On the working code is kind of a misunderstanding of everything we've done in the 10 or 15 years behind us. So I think a big task is to learn out of the three horizons model, the Innovators Dilemma, that we will need to empower the pioneers and settlers again in the company, and need to exploit what we learned through Agile and Lean in these disciplines.